For joining us for today's webinar, Onboarding New Devices in Half the Time. This is an automation workshop. Something that we kind of talked about at the end of 2022 was moving our webinars to being as hands-on and takeaway focused as possible. And so while we've always been very hands-on in the product with our webinars, we want to get even more so in 2023. And so this webinar is our first attempt at that, where we'll be spending the vast majority of time directly in Ninja, showing you how to accomplish the goal of the webinar, which is building out an onboarding workflow in Ninja to help significantly reduce the amount of time you're working on onboarding. So we will do some slides, but expect to spend most of the time in the Ninja platform. As for many of our webinars, it's myself and Jeff Hunter here. My name is Pete Breton. I am the Senior Director of Product and Customer Marketing at Ninja. And Jeff, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name is Jeff Hunter, and I am the Sales Engineer Manager for the MSP vertical at Ninja.
And Jeff is going to do all the heavy lifting, actually showing you how to do this stuff in Ninja. I'm just here to talk. So today, really what we want to do is give you a framework that you can use to automate your new device onboarding and whatever that might look like. We want to give you a framework and then the tools to go out and build your own. Now, every single environment is going to be a little bit different, so we can't prescribe the individual automations that you're going to build, but we want to give you a framework and tools and ideas so that when you leave the webinar, you can actually go out and build this out yourself. Myself, Jeff, and some of the product managers here at Ninja got together and really tried to beat up this idea of how you can get a lot of value out of new device onboarding automation. Came up with a framework, came up with some really discrete ideas from our customers who are doing this, in production, and we want to bring those to you today. And then Jeff is going to walk you through some of those examples and show you step-by-step how to set them up in Ninja. After we've gone through some slides and the live walkthrough, we do have at the end a couple kind of high-level questions we want to answer around when Ninja or another tool might be better. And we are going to wrap up with a Q&A section and our $100 gift card giveaway. So hang out with us until then, and we'll announce the gift card winner at the end. And yes, Michael, this webinar will be recorded, and it is interactive. So there is a Q&A section at the top of the app. If you have questions, go ahead and put them there. We do prioritize those questions in Q&A because your peers can go and vote on those and say which ones they want answered first. We will try to answer questions in chat as well as we go. Awesome. So I want to start with a framework of how to set up new devices. And we came up with 5 steps. Clean up the endpoint, configure it, install required apps, deploy security resources, and validate. Now, if you're working with a brand new machine, that clean up the endpoint may not be very robust. It may just be, removing some bloatware. It may be very minimal, right? But it's definitely the first thing you're going to want to do. If you're recycling the machine, there's potentially a lot of work that's going to be done there. If an employee leaves, you're recycling that machine, setting it up for a new employee, there potentially could be a lot of work there. And it's definitely step number 1. The last step here, validate, is probably also in the right place, right? When you're done, you've done all of your setup work, you do want to have a validation step, and that should happen at the end. That being said, the configure, install, and deploy security resources, those steps, there's really good arguments for which order you want to do those in. And so we're not being prescriptive here around which order you should do those, but those are the steps you're going to go through. And in many cases, this might be the step-by-step framework that you use. And so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on all of these and provide some examples on each of these that you can take away and go build off of. So I'm going to dive into those examples here. These are real-world examples that we sourced from our customers who are automating endpoint setup at scale today. Because of the nature of these webinars, we do want to go with more generic examples that have broader applicability to our customer base. But the hope is you could take these, build out your own ideas that are applicable to your specific environments. If you're a company that has a very, very specific configuration requirement that's not something most people do, you're not going to see it here. But we want to give you some ideas that you can take and go start building out your own steps and ideas off of, so that when you leave the webinar today, you have a few starting steps that you can go and start getting value out of this webinar from day one. And so I'll start with clean up the endpoint. Again, this is probably applicable mostly if you are essentially recycling a used endpoint. So, employee A leaves, you're resetting up the endpoint for employee B. This is where that clean up the endpoint step is really going to add a lot of value. That run Windows update repair, that's one we're actually going to go through today. Jeff's going to show you what that looks like. If you're taking an old endpoint in and recycling it, you want to make sure that patching is going to work. So you may want to run this step so that you can ensure patching is going to work. You're going to want to potentially remove all of your unused accounts, maybe rip out some bloatware, get rid of printers that may not make sense anymore, and then remove all of that user data that's already there, right? Get it ready, sanitize the endpoint so that when you set it up for the new user, it is as smooth a process for them as possible. Number 2 here, configure the endpoint. There are a million different things you can do here, and each one is going to be specific to your environment or environments and your customer needs and your end user needs. But these are really good examples that we see over and over again. Turning off fast boot, that's one we're actually going to go through in the walkthrough today. But you can also do things like deploy your Wi-Fi profile, changing your power plans, setting a computer name, mapping network drives. And for our EMEA partners or partners outside North America, really, maybe you need to set the language of the endpoint or change the keyboard layout so that it is ready for the end user and they have the best experience possible. If you have a fully remote workforce and they have their own Wi-Fi at home, you're probably not going to do that step, right? But there are a ton of things you could do here. You could set a background with the computer name, for example. You could, if people still use screensavers, you could turn on the screensaver. Whatever it is, this step is where you're really going to make device level changes that are going to set the endpoint up for the best possible experience for the end user. The most common use case that people, I wouldn't say everybody is using, but the vast majority of Ninja users are going to use this for, even without this conversation, it's going to be to install required applications, right? Everyone's using Ninja for that. Everyone's using their endpoint management program for that. And so this is a really common use case, right? But when you're automating new device setup, this is a really great opportunity to get the applications you're going to use broadly across all your endpoints onto those endpoints from day one. So things like your backup program. If you're using IT management tools outside of Ninja, so let's say you're using a third-party remote access tool that doesn't integrate with Ninja, that might be something you do here. If your end users require VPN, that might be something you do here. And then your security software as well, right? Like your AV or your EDR or whatever it may be, all of that you want to deploy out in that first new device setup so that it's ready and available. And then last but not least here is deploying security resources. Create local admin is number 1 here. And that could have gone anywhere else. That could have been on configuration or even on cleanup. But, creating a local admin account so that you can take access. You can take action from a privileged account is a really, really important thing that you could do when you're setting up a new endpoint. In addition, maybe you want to set up password rotation on that account as well so that you can keep it more secure. You may want to do things like enabling BitLocker, enabling your firewall, and then also patching the endpoint and getting it fully updated and secure before you give it to the end user or before they start using it is another critical step here. Again, these are meant to be generic examples that you can take and use, but also expand on. And so what I'd love for you all to do right now is if any of you are doing automation for endpoint onboarding, if you can throw ideas in chat that you think might be applicable to others that you're not seeing here, that would be super helpful to share a broader view from you, our partners, to our other partners, because I think you can get a lot of value sharing with each other. So if you have any ideas and you're not seeing them here on things that you can automate in that new device setup, toss them in here so that everyone can benefit. That would be awesome. So the last step in this framework really is to validate that what you've done was successful. And this is an idea that came from some of our most mature partners, is that once you roll out these changes and configurations and you've done these automations, let's go back and validate that they actually worked. And not just the script was successful or failed, the installation was successful or failed, but let's go find a way to validate that it actually worked. So setting up some kind of validation step to report back success or failure is really important. And this is a completely generic example in a slide, but we'll show you an example just like this in Ninja, and what it can look like. I actually want to read off some of the examples we have here in chat that I think people might find interesting. So it sounds like Chris Demersky's example here of disabling Windows 11 upgrading is a great example of something you may want to automate out of the system when you set up a new device. Josh Wenke here has, they're using scripts to create accounts and configure certain applications in Ninja. Setting registry key, this is from Sean Votes. Setting registry keys to run upon login to configure and personalize apps. That's a great idea. Christopher Ryan is using custom scripts to enable enable restore points. Another great example. Let's see. Renan is saying removing old versions of TeamViewer and reinstalling. Checking if BitLocker is enabled, and if not, then enabling it. We have a bunch of great examples here. I'd love to see more as we go on, but those are all great examples. Thanks. Hey, I pronounced Sean's name right. Thanks for sharing those examples. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's actually going to run through these examples. Again, I want to reinforce that these are intended to be generic examples that you can build off of, and it's more the framework and the process that Jeff is going to walk through that's going to help you do this more effectively. And so with that, let's turn it over to Jeff to share.
All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen here. Awesome. We are going to take one example from each of the 4 categories that Pete showed for actions that you might need to take when you're onboarding a new device. Now, this is not just, hey, 4 different scripts. Let's go ahead and click execute and call it a day. I really want to show you 4 different mechanisms within Ninja for carrying out action, for identifying what the status of the device is and then carrying out an action. However, I am going to start with the most basic example of running a script. This is running our Windows Update Repair script. I can tell you from personal experience, I have run into situations where devices, you go in to take over a location and their devices are not anywhere near ready to receive Windows updates. Windows may not, in fact, be actually licensed. It may not be genuine Windows. And I've also seen situations where the Windows Update services are actually disabled so that people don't get those annoying pop-ups. But of course, that also means that their machines are nowhere near close to being patched. So to ensure that the machines are ready to receive those Windows updates, to decrease the amount of time that we're going to be spending on troubleshooting issues, we're going to go ahead and set up a script to run as soon as the device joins to the policy. I'm going to come into my policy section here, and then I have my Omni Consumer Products policy. Now in here on the left-hand side, you're going to see my scheduled scripts, and I've got a few in here, but the first one I want to talk about is the Windows Update Repair script. Again, this is just checking the core services that form the backbone of Windows updates running successfully, and it's making sure that they're turned on and that they're in the correct state upon startup. So this one ultimately is fairly simple, but we're going to come back to this in a little bit to talk about how we validate this. We're running this script, we're running it once immediately, which means it's going to run as soon as the device joins this policy, and this applies to existing devices on this policy as well as any new devices that might join in the future. Now, how do we know this is successful? We've got some validation components we'll talk about towards the end, but this method right here is great because it's ensuring that everybody receives this change, and then we've got some validation aspects we'll talk about beyond that. Now, the second aspect I want to talk about here, the second example I'd like to go over, is a little bit more complex. It is disabling fast boot. Fast boot is what I would consider more of a configuration action within Ninja, as opposed to cleaning up the endpoint with Windows Update right here. Fast boot can cause issues with certain applications. It can also cause issues with reliable uptime reporting because the kernel doesn't fully reset. So you might still see that the device has been online for an extremely long period of time, even if the end user thinks that, hey, I'm shutting down this machine every single night, but I'm still being told that I need to reboot my machine. I'm still seeing that I've been online for an excessive amount of time. And fastboot can often be a culprit of that. Most importantly, fastboot can also interfere with the installation of Windows updates, especially when it comes to the difference between a shutdown and a reboot. So what we're going to do is ensure that fastboot is disabled. First, for that, we're going to need a script. So if I close out of my policies section here and go into my scripting library, you'll see that we have something called a template library. And the template library is something Ninja provides in terms of scripts out of the box. You can see all the PowerShell code for anything that's inside of the template library here. And you can see that one of the options we have here is a option to disable Windows Fastboot. If I scroll down, I think right here, this is going to go ahead and set the registry key that we need to set to 0 to disable Hybrid Boot, also known as Fast Startup or Fast Boot. Now that we have our script that's actually going to take the action, how are we going to run this through Ninja? We're not just going to run it as another scheduled script like we did in the first example. We are going to go back into policies here, and I'll go back into my Omni Consumer Products policy. Now, if I go down here, you're going to see I have a condition called SCR, Disable Windows Fastboot. Now, conditions here within Ninja, this is actually a monitor. We're checking for something, and then we're taking, potentially taking an action, or we're creating an alert, or otherwise raising a ticket for you. The mechanism I'm using to do this check is something called script result condition, which is a great example because it allows for a ton of customization. Anything that you could possibly do with the script or monitor with the script, we can run that on a recurring basis and then monitor the result code, the text string output, and then, of course, any error codes that come out. And we can raise an alert or otherwise generate some sort of ticket or notification from this event. So in this case, I'm actually just running my Windows Fast Startup, disable Windows Fast Boot script, and I'm running that every 24 hours. Now, the difference here is that this is recurring. So this is where we actually have a recurring check in place to ensure that Windows Fast Boot is disabled. I'll contrast that with the first example, which was just running a script, and then what the ultimate result of that script, wasn't really something that we talked about during that first example. We'll talk about it more towards the end of this, but this is another example. Like I said, the big difference here is you get a ton of customization. Anything that you could potentially look for with Batch or PowerShell scripting, this is now an avenue for you to expand what Ninja would natively track and natively monitor on. Now, what I can do in this event, this is actually just the entire script is running and disabling fastboot if it's not already disabled. But I could also do a check here, and then I could respond to the check with a script. Conditions have the ability to be self-healed. So whatever I detect with the script that I run or with the condition that triggers, I can then have that respond with a script or multiple scripts. So that might be to run a script to disable Windows Fastboot to make the appropriate registry change. So there's a lot you can do here in terms of customization with the script result condition, not just sort of the basic example that I'm showing right here. Now we'll go ahead and move on to our third example, which is going to be deploying software. So now we've looked at how we can just essentially execute a script as soon as the device joins the policy. We've seen how we can have a recurring check occur so that the machine is always in compliance, in this case with fastboot being disabled. Now let's look at the third option. So deploying software, making sure that the computers on this policy for this customer have the appropriate applications to make sure that they can do their job. Again, I'm keeping this example pretty high level. I have my install Notepad++ condition right here. So we're staying in the condition space. This is also a monitor. All of what we're seeing here in conditions is a monitor. But what this is monitoring is not a script that runs on a recurring basis. It's actually monitoring for the absence of Notepad++. I could also flip the script on this and look for the presence of Notepad++. Maybe I want to take the inverse action and I'd actually like to uninstall an application. That would be a good workflow there. But in this case, I'm looking for the absence of Notepad++, and this might be a little hard to see, but we have asterisks on either side of Notepad++ here. Those serve as wildcards, so I don't have to be super specific with the name. We'll just look for anything that happens to have Notepad++ in the title of the application. So that generates my notification, my alert, could potentially generate a ticket. But what I really care about here is sort of the A-B chaining where I can respond with a script to anything that then gets detected. And in this case, I'm saying, all right, well, if you don't have Notepad++, then we're going to go ahead and run this script to install it, make sure that you have it. Again, this is an always on action. So anytime somebody happens to have Notepad++ removed from their machine, this is going to trigger again, and it would then again install Notepad++ on the machine. So it does have the benefit of being always on. Again, the element of sort of a recurring check to ensure that you're in compliance with whatever line of business applications need to be installed. I'm now going to move on to a much more complex example, I think, which is creating a local admin service account. And the reason why this is more complex is because in this case, we actually need to supply information to Ninja in order for us to take action on this. We're going to go ahead and use a script that we have inside of our template library again. So we'll close out here, we'll go back into the template library. And in this case, what we're going to be looking for is a script called report local admins. What this does is it checks for everybody who's a local administrator on a particular machine, and then it returns that into a custom field within Ninja. Custom fields in Ninja are exactly what they sound like. They are customizable data fields of a few different types, and they can also receive the output of batch or PowerShell scripts. So anything that you can run with a batch or PowerShell script or go collect with a batch or PowerShell script, you have the ability to write that into a custom field. And once it's in that custom field, you could search for it, you could export it as a part of a CSV report. And maybe most importantly for our purposes, you can also monitor it as part of a condition, which is again going to allow us to make sure that our admin is present. And if it's not present, then respond with a script to create that administrator. So right here, I have my report local admin script. Now you can see the PowerShell code right here. Very easy to just import in the top right, and that'll then become available in my library. Fortunately, I've already done that part. So now that we have the actual script, we would need to create the custom field that we're going to write into. I've done that part as well. You would come into devices here, and then you would see two different options for custom fields. One is a role-based custom field where you would assign that custom field to a specific device type, i.e., you're reporting on battery health, would make sense to have a role-based custom field assigned to laptops because you really wouldn't care about battery health on desktops or servers. And I'd contrast that with a global custom field, which is truly global, goes to every instance of a device inside of Ninja. If I come in here, you'll see that I've already created many custom fields, including one that is going to report on any of my local administrators right here. So now I've created the custom field. I've made it so that I can read and write from that custom field with my scripts, but now I need to populate it with information using the script that we pulled from the template library. So I'll go into my policy section here. Again, because the users on the machine are going to fluctuate over time, I do want to have a recurring element of always keeping this information up to date. I don't want to just rely on the one time that I run the script. So when I come into my scheduled scripts here, you're seeing that when I check for my local admins, I am actually doing this on a recurring basis again. I'm checking every 12 hours. So I'm always going to have information that is at least 12 hours or newer within my custom field. So I'm always making up-to-date and accurate decisions based on the automation that I have set up within Ninja. So now I have my information. I have the information I need to make my decision. When I come back into my conditions here, you're going to see that we have a custom field here called local admin service account. This is where we're checking to make sure that our local admin service account is present. We have our custom field up here, and we are looking for anybody who is a local user here. And if we do not have the name of our desired MSP service account installed, we're going to go ahead and raise an alert. However, again, we don't really care about the alert right now. What we care about is responding with the script. And this is creating my admin account for my service account. You can see my username here as a parameter, and then the second parameter would be my very secure password that I have right here. And so if we ever detect that the user is missing, we're going to go ahead and run the script to create that user. So that way, if for whatever reason, there's a conflict with the domain and the user gets created, Ninja's going to say, no, you need to have that in place. We're going to go ahead and try to put that back onto the machine. And again, this is an example that as long as the information is being consistently supplied to the custom field, it's always on. Any change on the machine is going to be automatically remediated by Ninja. Now, we've gone through 4 examples. Let's talk about the 5th and maybe the most important one, which is validation. How do we know that anything that we've been doing has actually been working? So I'm going to, again, close out of my policy section, and I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit of what I've done on the back end here that I haven't really talked about so far. I'm going to go back and show you the custom fields that I'm using to report on the status of these actions. If I go into my library here, sorry, not my library, my devices, and then go into my global custom fields, down at the bottom, you can see I've created a variety of custom fields, an entirely different section called device setup validation right here, and then a little separator just for visual neatness. But below that, I'm reporting on my Windows Update repair status. I'm reporting on my Windows fast boot status. I am reporting on the installation of Notepad++, and I'm reporting on my MSP service account status. So how are we doing that validation? Actually, in all of these scripts that you've seen so far, the remediation scripts that take the action whenever something is detected, those actually have that validation built into it. So if we go into one of these scripts here, I think I'll go ahead and use the fast boot script. This is after I've already imported the fast boot script into my environment. Now you can see here, we're doing some checks here, and I've made modifications to this script to write out into custom fields whatever the error message or status of this is. So right here, we're starting the process. We're checking to make sure that we have the right privileges to execute this. And so if there's any issues with that, we're going to get an error message that, hey, you need to run this with admin privileges. But I'm also using this one line right here to write into a custom field within Ninja what the message was. So if this wasn't successful, I'm getting an access denied message. If there was a failure down here, I'm getting a failure. Something went wrong, and then the timestamp. If it's successful, I'm also getting an indication that this was successful, and I'm also getting the timestamp there. So I've built this into all of the scripts that I've shown today. Is just a little bit of try catch if then statements to ensure that I'm actually successful in this, and then it will go ahead and write that into a custom field. So what does this look like in practice? We've set up all this validation. What does it look like in practice? I'm going to go ahead and go to a device where this all worked perfectly. I'll go to this device right here. And I'll note that I'm keeping things simple for the sake of the webinar. I have essentially a binary system, 1 or 0, success or failure. That's really all I care about. But you can kind of build out as much logic as you'd like into this to account for all the variety of error or exit codes that you might see. Now, when I come down to the bottom of this device here, I'm going to see a lot of different information. And so you can see things like SMB status right here. These all, I think, relate to what actions you might want to take on a machine. We can also see Windows Update status right here. We can see when the last patch was installed on this machine, Office 365. But in terms of the examples that I've shown today, you can see here, I have been successful with my Windows Update repair status, ran that yesterday. My fast boot was successfully disabled right here. Notepad++ was successfully installed, and then my MSP service account was also created as well. So this is great. I was successful. But what happens when you are not successful? And that's where kind of all the automation that we've seen right now, this has all been about configuring and set it up. But you're not, watching this process every step of every day. You're not sitting here kind of babysitting it. What you're doing is you're using these custom fields right here to sort of report on the validation. So what I could do with this information now that I have it is I could go to the search menu and I go ahead and say, hey, show me anybody who's had a failure in any of these fields, these custom fields that I've created. So anybody who's had any issues with, let's say, Windows Update status, or sorry, Windows Update repair status, are there any people or any devices who have had failure? And if we look at this, we can see that there have been. There's this machine right here that recently went offline. And if I click into it and I go into my custom fields, and if I scroll down to the bottom here, I'm going to see that most of the configuration actions that we took here were successful. So fast boot status, Notepad++, MSP service account went off without a hitch. But right here, Windows Update status, something went wrong. So that indicates that we should take a look at it. Now, this is great to be able to search for it. And of course, we can export to a CSV in the top right here if I want to get this information out of Ninja and into Excel so I can better work with it, or I just have a need to work with it outside of Ninja. But what you can really use those validation fields for is it's the first time that you're really having to look at something. We can use policies to alert whenever we have a situation where our custom field that is reporting on validation is reporting a failure of any kind. So if I come into my policy section once again, kind of my overall view of this is all controlled by a custom field right here called validation of device setup. And this is monitoring several custom fields. And it's just saying, hey, anytime you have failure at all inside any of those custom fields, that is then going to generate a ticket. So this is really the first time at which you're having to actually touch something within Ninja. Once you set up this workflow and it's operating, like I said, you're not watching every single step, every part of the process. You're letting the automated process run through, and then ultimately you're being alerted by Ninja. This could be an alert. This could be something that you manually look for inside the search menu, or it could be something that you use to just generate a ticket. We can go ahead and create a ticket anytime any of these custom fields report issues with validation, which means that, yeah, you're saving time. I've played fair with all of my examples here. Everything you've seen was set up and tested on a previously used laptop that's about 6 years old at this point. And I didn't really do anything other than to validate that my testing worked. It took me about 2 hours to set up everything in Ninja, which I'll say is probably a little shorter than most people, just because I do spend all day, every day in Ninja. And then it took another 90 minutes or so of testing to confirm that everything actually worked. And I only typoed two things that broke the entire setup, which for any regular webinar viewers, that's progress for me. So yeah, I think you can see here that this really can scale. There's a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak, in terms of what you can do with the variety of processes that we've seen here so far today.
Awesome. Jeff, that was incredibly thorough and a lot of work, as you said, to set up. Although, 3.5 hours isn't that much for showing all these people how to do it. So we do have two more slides, and then we have a ton of questions. So I'm going to run through them pretty quick, and then we can jump into the questions. So I wanted to just provide like one screen that goes through the different mechanisms that Jeff talked about. So there are kind of 5 automation mechanisms in Ninja: scheduled scripts, scheduled tasks, the script result condition triggered scripts, and then custom field triggered scripts. There's some overlap here in how they're created and set up, but they have different use cases. And so a scheduled script, which is you go into a policy, you go to scheduled scripts, and you deploy a script at a given time. The purpose of that is to take a very specific action on a group of devices controlled by a policy at a specific time or times. It's pretty linear, right? It's do this at this time or at these times. Scheduled tasks, which Jeff didn't actually show in this, but they're very similar. It's the exact same thing as a scheduled script, but instead of taking action against devices in a policy, you're taking action against devices in a group. So in a search group instead of in a policy. So it's the same thing. You're deploying the script at a specific time or times. Then you have our script result condition, which is when you're going to deploy a script and then act based on the result of that script. And so you deploy a script, it returns 1 or 0 or yes or no or success or failure or black, white, and red. Whatever it is, you're going to take action based on the result of that. And that's where you're really going to want to be regularly checking for information and then taking action based on those results. So that's about kind of continuous compliance. And that's when you're going to want to use that script result condition. Condition triggered scripts are going to be very similar. They're also about continuous compliance. And so they're a little bit less flexible. You can do almost anything with a script result condition. Condition triggered scripts are easier, but they're going to do that same thing. They're going to keep you constantly in compliance. And so you're going to detect a state change or an event or something happening on the machine and then immediately taking action to keep the device in compliance. And then last here is the custom field triggered scripts. It's also done via conditions, but it requires the use of a custom field. This is when you need to act on information that Ninja doesn't collect natively. We provide a lot of information out of the box, but there's always additional information you may want to act on. So if you want to take action on information we don't collect by default, or if you have sort of multi-step complex automations, that's when you're going to use these custom field triggered scripts. I just wanted to share this with you because I think it can help frame everything that Jeff just did in like a really easy to consume manner. And so the next one, it's a little bit of an objection handling here. We know that golden images have been something that people have used in IT for a long, long time, and we want to address when sort of this agent-based approach versus an image-based approach might work. Which one's better? It sounds like we maybe should have had this conversation about Intune as well, but yeah, we focused on image and agent based. So the image based approach is going to be really ideal for those highly standardized environments and in office environments. If everyone's working in the office, it's really easy to get your hands physically on the machine, deploy an image. The more standardized that image is, the better this image based approach is going to work. You're going to have highly standardized device setups. You're going to wipe the device before you set it up, which is great for data privacy for those recycled machines. And generally, you don't need that validation step because you're wiping it and just throwing on an image wholesale. Uh, there are drawbacks to this approach, though. If you have remote employees, you're going to double ship, right? You're going to ship to the office and then ship to the remote employee. It can be really time intensive to install these images and also to curate those images, especially as you get more complexity and more customization. It can be incredibly time intensive to manage these images. And then, last but not least, you don't have the level of personalization at scale that you get with an agent based approach. And so our view on this agent-based approach is that it is better for those remote and distributed environments, and for environments where you need customization or personalization at scale. You still get that automated setup, and you get it at the end user location, wherever the device is when they first turn it on. It allows you to customize at scale. It's easier to set up. We think we spend a lot of time in Ninja, so results may vary, but we think it's easier to set up. And funny enough, it actually can be pre-installed on a golden image so that you can still take the image-based approach, but then allow that personalization at scale. The drawback, though, is as Jeff said, he made two typos that made the whole thing fail. There are potentially more points of failure. A script fails, an application fails to install. So there is some testing and validation that has to happen. So with that, if you're not a current customer and you want to learn more about Ninja, go to NinjaOne.com. You can start a free trial at NinjaOne.com/free trial form. Our intention is to actually take this and create a blog and step-by-step guide after the fact that we can share with you on our blog and send out. But we will send out the recording, and I'll ask our marketing team to actually send out the deck as well. We don't normally do that, but I saw a lot of requests. So we will send that out as well. I'm going to stop here, announce our gift card winner, and then we have a lot of questions to answer. So, Christine, if you could hop on and announce our winner.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pete. Super glad that you were all able to join us this morning. I always like to say I'm here for the fun stuff. So I'm going to announce the $100 gift card winner. If we can all pop in the chat and say a huge congratulations to, drumroll, Ryan Priest. Congratulations, Ryan. Be on the lookout for an email from me. And yeah, back to you, Pete.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine, and congratulations, Ryan. Jeff, I think one that we want to start with is how can Ninja be pre-installed on a golden image? I think that's something that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, for sure. Let me go ahead and pull up some documentation just to give a better visual for what we need to do here. But effectively, what you can do is install the Ninja agent on the golden image. There are some special steps that you need to take as a part of that. Normally, we would probably just see that as the exact same device every time it registered to Ninja. So there's a registry setting that you need to modify so that whenever you deploy the golden image, it registers as a fresh instance of a device inside of Ninja with its own unique UUID. I just posted that link into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat again right here. You do need to be a Ninja partner in order to view that documentation. So if you're not a Ninja partner, you'll have access after you start a trial. I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick just to give a quick visual.
Yeah, and Anthony, if you don't follow these steps, it will show up as a duplicate machine in Ninja. So you have to follow these steps, or the whole premise won't really work.
Yeah, exactly. And this outlines the steps right here that you're going to need to take. We have steps from Mac right here, as well as Windows directly below that. You'll see the steps that we need to take here. It's a file called no clone. If you're curious about where that is, it's a little hidden. It's actually down here at the very bottom. So if you ever are in the dojo and you're looking for scripts, always make sure to check the bottom of this or registry files because they often get a little hidden down here at the very bottom. But this outlines what the process is. This is, like I said, great for ensuring that any of your golden images have a unique instance of Ninja as they get deployed. I'll also mention, because we are talking about re-imaging machines, we also have a deduplication feature inside of Ninja. If I go into administration, and under my general settings right here at the very bottom, there's a few advanced settings, including one for deduplication. So if you are taking a machine that was previously imaged and you want to preserve that data historically, you can turn this feature on. And Ninja, if we're able to match the old dead instance of the device to the new instance of the device that you spun up, we'll go ahead and merge that together to preserve, like I said, your historical data over time.
Awesome. I promised to bring up something for, let me see, early on, an early question here. Um, Let me see if I can find it really quick. From Kevin Greco. He asked if we can show off how to utilize a file repository for MSI EXE installation scripts.
Yeah, great question. So let's go ahead and go into our policies, just because I think this is the most effective place to store and execute these. Within Ninja, out of the box, you would have 6 default policies. They're the ones with the house icon next to them. You can see down here, we also have that for Windows Server and Windows Workstation. We typically recommend to make these kind of your overall global parents. All of your other policies that might be organization specific, location specific, specific to a subset of devices, you can go ahead and create a new policy here, and then you would establish a parent, which would mean that all the settings in the parent policy get passed down to this new policy that we have here. And really, this allows for much better ease of use of management because anything you put in the parent automatically gets passed down to all the child policies that are set to inherit it. So if I go into my Windows Workstations policy here, I could go ahead and go into my scheduled scripts. And what I'll do is I'll set up what we call our install application script right here inside of scheduled scripts. I can go ahead and then add a script. This is essentially a script block, so you can actually execute more than one script inside of sort of the individual macros that we have here. In this case, I'll go ahead and do my install application script. Like I said, this is out of the box within Ninja, allows you to upload up to a 1 GB MSI or EXE to our servers. If it's greater than 1 gig, you just need to give us a link on your own file sharing service, blob storage or Dropbox, anything like that should work fine. And then we can add in silent command line parameters to make sure that the end user is not bothered. And you can also enter in other parameters to ensure that maybe the behavior of a reboot after installation or a specific target directory. At the bottom here, I know this came up as a question during chat, which is sort of how can you execute scripts with different levels of privilege? Our default would be system. That's what we use out of the box. And you could also, out of the box, try to execute something as the current logged on user, assuming they have the rights for that. And then below that, you can see local and domain admin. This is something you can input into our credentials exchange, and that way we can securely execute the script using the credentials that you provide. So we do have that capability.
Awesome.
Now,
I think
once
it's good.
I upload, sorry, go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I thought you were done. I was going to add a follow on question.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and stick the landing here real quick, which is that once we set this up as a scheduled script as an installer, you can see here the option to go ahead and have this kick off on a recurring basis. We could have it run once immediately, like we saw earlier in the webinar. But one thing that I like to use for ad hoc installations would be none. It actually doesn't run on a scheduled basis at all. It only runs when you call it manually. And so now, once I set that up, and I go to a device that is on this policy or on a child policy that is inheriting from my overall global parent, I'm going to have access to that script and it's just going to immediately run. And I'm not going to have to re upload the installer or anything like that. So I'll come to one of these devices right here. Let's say Dr. Abed's workstation. There we go. And when I hover over the script here, you can see I have 2 options. One of these is to initiate the script from my script library, but that effectively means I'm doing this from scratch. I would have to re-upload my installer to execute it. but I can also run from my policy, which means anything that I've put as a scheduled script within policy is just going to run as soon as I call it. And that includes all of my installers. So this is ideal if I need to install Ringover, install Slack, install Zoom, anything that I've put inside of that overall global parent, I am now going to have access to, as long as the device, again, is on that policy or on a child policy associated, inheriting from the overall global parent here. Now, this is just one way to execute. You could, of course, use the search menu. We mentioned search groups earlier. If you wanted to automatically identify any machines that are missing the particular application, we could come in here to our additional filters. We could go ahead and find our software inventory filter. We might look for anybody who does not contain any version of, to keep it simple here, we'll just say Reader. So I'll find anybody who doesn't have Adobe Reader in place. And I'm also going to further limit this down to be just workstations. So right here, instead of looking at all my different device types, I really just care about workstations that have Reader installed. So now I've taken this from overall 104 machines that were in this environment down to 8. Now this is great. I could just check the box across all these machines and I could run my script to install them. On any offline devices that we see here, the script would just queue up and run as soon as the offline device returned to online status. But in this case, I want an element of recurring compliance. I want to check, and for any devices, not just currently in this list, but any devices in the future that might get added to Ninja who wouldn't have this application installed. I'll go ahead and save this as a search group, and I'll say this does not have Reader. That saves as a search group. I could favorite that for quick access on the left-hand side. But what I really care about here is sort of an automated action that's going to kind of resolve and get Reader installed on all these machines. And so to set that up, I'll go into administration. I'll go down to my tasks here. I'll set up a new task. This is going to be to install Reader. I think I actually already have something for this out of the box, but of course, you could also use that install application script that I saw earlier. And because I want the element of recurringly checking, I'm going to go ahead and set this to look every single day. So every day we're going to look for devices that don't have Adobe Reader, and we're going to run a script to install Adobe Reader on those machines. And the dynamic element here of Ninja doing the heavy lifting, that comes not with the top two options, which would be statically selecting organizations or statically selecting devices. The dynamic option would be the bottom option here, groups, where we can go ahead and select a search group that we created. So we'll only run the script on the devices that are found by the search parameters. In that case, it would be just workstations that do not have Reader installed. So a lot of different ways. I think we've already seen 3 different ways you could deploy software through Ninja today. So a lot of different options here. Really just depends on what you're looking to accomplish.
Awesome. That was an incredibly thorough response. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to run down the list of unanswered Q&A questions. Starting at the top, Kelly asked, does Ninja provide automated password rotation and checkout for local admin accounts? I know the answer, but you might have a recommendation here where to look.
Yeah, no, and to be transparent, out of the box default native functionality to Ninja, not something that we would be able to accomplish. However, we've seen how we can use custom fields. We haven't spoken about them extensively, except that they can receive the output of batch or PowerShell scripts. But you can also have the custom fields receive or sort of act as secure fields. And that means that whatever is contained within that secure field is safely hashed out and secured, so that you have to enter MFA in order to click to reveal what is contained inside of that secure field. We can see an example of that on this device here. If I go into these custom fields, you'll see at the bottom here we have a secure custom field with the local admin password for this device right there. And then I would have to click that to reveal the password. And I would have to enter MFA in order for that to be viewable. We, of course, would have an audit trail of who has revealed this field as well. But let's get down to the brass tacks here of how are we actually getting the information populated into this custom field. This is a script that we have available in our dojo. I'll go ahead and drop this link into the chat. This is from Ben Jones, who is a partner of Ninja. He is a very smart guy. He has set up both a domain admin rotation as well as a local admin password rotation. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this one right here. Go ahead and paste this into the chat here. So what we're doing here with this is we're creating the admin if it doesn't exist. You can see right here creating the MSP admin account. And then we're setting a random alphanumeric password. So this is not going to be a standardized password across all of your devices. Every device is going to have its own unique password, which I think is going to reduce the potential vectors for compromise. And so we run this script, and you can run this as often as you'd like. You could do every day. That might be a little overkill. You might want to do once a week or even once a month. And it'll take the randomly generated password and it'll then write that into this local admin custom field that I've set up right here. And so you're getting a unique password. It's always going to be new every single time you run that script. It's always going to be unique on a per device basis. Now, I will give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain here. Currently, the secure fields right here, they can only be written to. So we can randomly generate a password on the device and then write it into a secure field. But today, we don't have the ability to actually pull from what's within the secure field and then use that within the script. But we are actually very close. Our next release, our 5.3.8 release that should drop next month, is going to have that ability to take what's in this password field and then pass that down to the endpoints. So if you don't want to go the extremely distributed method of having every device with its own unique password, in probably about a month or so, you are going to have that ability to set sort of a more standardized password and then pass that down and execute it on your endpoints.
Awesome. And yes, secure fields in custom fields are fantastic. I'm glad some people didn't know about them and do now. Going into Q&A, the next question here is from Gerald. Will any of this info be available in handouts or checklists later? I just do want to clarify again, we will be sending out the recording. We will send out the deck as a PDF. We don't normally do that, but I've seen a lot of requests, so we will send it out as a PDF. And then once the kind of step-by-step blog post that's going to come from this is done, we'll send that out to this group as well. That'll be later, maybe a week or two out, but we will make all of that available to you to make this easier and more actionable. The next question here is from Carrie. Is there a way to control the run order of scripts and actions from within a policy?
Yes, there is. So if I go into administration and then inside of policies, uh, right here, in terms of our scheduled scripts that we see set up here, there is no way to determine how these run. Let's say you had multiple run once immediately script blocks. There would be no way to configure that. So usually what I recommend is when somebody does have something set up to run once, go ahead and include the multiple scripts within a single script block like we're seeing right here. And then from there, we can go ahead and add in some of our scripts. I'll just pick a few at random here, but you can see that once I add in these scripts, I do have the option here to click and drag them in order to reorder the manner in which they're going to execute. So this is where you would have that ability to determine how, in what order scripts are kicking off here. I don't believe there's any limit on how many scripts you can run here. There is no logic between these scripts. So let's say a failure within this check AD replication status script right here, that's not going to have any um, impact on the subsequent scripts that are going to run. These are all operating independently, but they will or execute one after the other in the order that you've listed right here. And that also goes for our conditions as well. If you're responding with multiple scripts in response to a condition, they're all going to kick off in the order that you have them posted in the right-hand side of this modal box here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to take this opportunity to pitch Ninja Ticketing. If you can keep this screen up. Shaya asked, how can I raise a ticket on a condition? I only see the option of notification. To have ticketing created, a ticket created here in Ninja, you have to turn on Ninja Ticketing. You can do that in the administration tab under apps and turn on Ninja Ticketing. That will allow you to use ticketing single pane in Ninja and allow you to create a ticket directly from there. You can also do that if you have a PSA turned on, like ConnectWise Manage or Datto Autotask. That will allow you to create a ticket there as well. If you don't use any of those tools, the best thing to do to create a ticket in your ticketing system, let's say if you use Zendesk or Refresh Service, would be to notify via channels, as Jeff is showing here. You would create a channel for support@company.com that goes to your help desk or service desk, and this would create a ticket in your service desk whenever this condition is triggered. That would be the best way to do that, I think. Unless, Jeff, you have any additions.
No, I think you've nailed it there. I do want to talk about one additional aspect of conditions, which is kind of a recurring theme of our webinar today, which is how do you know if it worked or not? We have our conditions here. We can see the spooler is down. And then over here on the right-hand side, we can, of course, run a script. Obviously, it makes sense to try and remediate this issue with our start Windows service script. So I can just go ahead and select the print spooler here and make sure that's set to start. Now, again, how do I know if this works? We're just executing a script. We don't really have any validation behind that, except we do. When no longer met right here, this is your method for closing those loops and having Ninja reset the alert that gets generated based on what we detect, essentially the root condition being remediated. So when the root condition of the spooler being down is no longer in effect, we can then reset that alert. And that also plays into ticketing. With our ticketing integration here, we can set this up so that whenever Ninja detects that this has been reset or resolved, we can go ahead and transition your corresponding ticket to that same status. And you can customize that, and you can do the same for our ConnectWise Manage and our auto task integrations as well.
Awesome. We are closing up on time. I'm going to use the last 3 minutes as a quick pitch for you all. If you go to ninjaone.com/events, you can see all of our upcoming webinars. We have one planned pretty much every month for the year, although you can only see I think 2 of those upcoming ones available right now. We also do have a session called Partner Office Hours. That's also Jeff, myself, and a couple other of the Ninja team. We have no content ready for that. You show up and ask questions and we answer them, just like this Q&A session. So if you have additional questions we haven't answered, or questions outside of the concept of automating new device onboarding, come to those sessions. You can go again to ninjaone.com/events to sign up for that. And you can spend an hour with us asking questions, getting best practices, and walking through how to do things in Ninja. With that, I do want to wrap up by thanking all of you for attending. Hopefully this session was helpful. We will get that information out as soon as we can. Jeff, thank you so much for doing all the heavy lifting there. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.